when rational women flip into feminists. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and if you've known a fair amount of women throughout your life, especially ones in far leftist areas, you've undoubtedly run into this strange phenomenon where you'll know a perfectly nice, fair, and rational female who absolutely isn't a feminist. She might even go so far as to claim that she explicitly dislikes feminists, and that she thinks feminists are crazy man-haters, which she doesn't agree with because she actually really likes lots of men. And then, of course, all of a sudden, she goes feminist herself, and does everything she can to drink the Kool-Aid and essentially disavow everything she used to say. Usually, from my experience, these women aren't even particularly good at convincing me that their minds have legitimately changed, and they are now true believers in the patriarchy theory nonsense, especially considering the fact that we knew for certain that often, just a few months ago, she actively proclaimed that she didn't believe in patriarchy theory. And yet still, all of a sudden, you notice one day that she's posting links to ridiculously awful articles from feminist blogs on her Facebook timeline, in which she says that she agrees wholeheartedly that period shaming is a tool of the patriarchy, which is obviously such a completely ridiculous argument that I probably shouldn't even really talk about why it's a ridiculous argument. But if you were to attempt to engage with your friend about how maybe people just think periods are kind of gross, she'll accuse you of mansplaining and then maybe unfriend you eventually. So what's the deal? Well, my purpose here isn't to provide much hard evidence regarding a specific instance of this happening to a woman or two in an effort to show a case study. Granted, we do know that Katy Perry was paid something like $80,000 to endorse Hillary Clinton and then became a big feminist soon after. But I don't know her, so your guess is as good as mine. What I can do is think logically about why this likely happens, which makes perfect sense when I think about each woman in my life that I can remember this type of thing happening with, and the reason that I think that maybe this happened to them, which is that they became aware of some of the short-term privileges that feminism affords all women in the Western world, and the fact that maybe they could get a few more, and they become attached to one or more specific female privileges, and therefore they begin adamantly defending them in the laziest way possible, by embracing the ideology that aims to afford them every unearned advantage they can dream of. One of my old videos was called, "Why Would White People Give Up White Privilege?" And the thesis posed was rather simple. The idea is that if somebody were to have very tangible systemic advantages afforded strictly by virtue of the color of their skin, why on earth would they decide to simply give them up once they became aware of them? Wouldn't people be more inclined to protect them? Truthfully, in terms of supposed white privilege, the fact that it's even being taught so regularly and that shaming white people for having white privilege has become the default allegation for individuals to hurl at people that they think are annoying because they don't actually feel like having a real conversation about racial issues. Well, the fact that we live in such a reality in socio-political discourse is more of a sign that quote-unquote white privilege might not even exist at all. Granted, I'm not trying to say that people aren't afforded numerous luxuries as a result of being a part of any majority population, because they absolutely are. However, are they afforded university admissions, scholarships, and the occasional occupational opportunities simply because they are white? Never. That being said, more often than not, the relentless rhetorical white privilege browbeating is almost certainly just a sign that white people are systemically denied various tangible privileges in life, including such basic acts of human decency as being able to list racially motivated kidnapping and tortures of, say, young special needs men as an actual hate crime in Chicago. I mean, they listed it as a hate crime, but a hate crime against special needs people, when we heard that they were chanting F white people, F Donald Trump when they broadcast it on Facebook Live. It doesn't take Angela Lansbury of Murder, She Wrote to know that something messed up was going on and that the city systemically won't even call it what it was. I believe that people teach white privilege essentially as a propaganda tactic designed not to make white people aware of all of the unearned advantages they receive, which systemically they don't receive, but rather it's an attempt to make white people feel ashamed and thus deserving of being systemically disadvantaged in left-leaning environments such as schools and quote-unquote progressive companies. When somebody teaches white privilege, it's not so much an act of getting white people to think compassionately about racial minorities, but rather it's an attempt to get white people to bend the knee and then say, "Thank you for being systemically discriminated against." Still, white people are an actual majority, and a financially prosperous one at that. At least certainly compared to African Americans, so it's not a great point to say that life is harder for white people, because while there are countless systemic disadvantages for white people, there's plenty of non-systemic social advantages. So instead, let's focus on a different technical majority population that both has essentially every systemic advantage available, as well as an undeniably better social and medical quality of life than their human counterparts. Females, as compared to males. In terms of the system being set up to grant whatever favor an individual might want, women have everything. And they have since last century. They are not required by law to sign up for selective services when they turn 18, which for a young man neglecting can land him in prison for a felony conviction and immediately cuts him off from being able to apply for things like financial aid for universities. Furthermore, there's countless gender-specific social services that serve females exclusively, from shelters to healthcare, and pretty much everything you can imagine. Also, women have benefited so much from affirmative action quotas on universities that they now compose about 59% of enrollment and have outweighed men for over 2 decades. Women are also the minority of victims of crimes of any type, including all violent crime and especially murder, where men are the dramatic majority of murder victims. Finally, while I could go on, and I probably should, women are given extraordinarily unfair treatment in the legal system, where they rarely go to prison, can falsely accuse men and almost never get in any trouble, and essentially they can milk their ex-husbands and babies' daddies for everything they can financially, encouraged to do so by the system. That being said, the mantra of quote-unquote male privilege is so mind-blowingly obviously the reverse of what is true that it's really absurd that people ever utter this with a straight face, as pretty much the only thing women can ever bring up to justify the fact that supposedly they have it rough is to say, "Well, I get pursued by rapey guys more than you," and "Poor me, it's hard to afford being a single mother, even with child support checks." Therefore, even a relatively unintelligent woman can realize that men are systemically disadvantaged. However, then of course, it might only take one motive, and each and every woman alive might decide that she wants to keep any or all of those many privileges, and thus she might change her mind essentially on a dime and become a feminist. All it would take for a specific woman would be getting sick of being married to a rich guy, and she might go on to realize that she could lie about him raping her in order to easily get a divorce and get about half or more of his money. In another woman's case, let's say she's struggling financially while raising her children after she initiated divorce. Does she want to work a part-time job? Of course not. But her baby daddy has been avoiding child support payments as he's practically homeless himself and he's missed a few. So bam, she becomes a big feminist and constantly talks trash about him on social media, hoping to socially pressure more regular payments out of him. In the case of the young woman shown here, who thankfully was convicted of falsely accusing 2 young men of rape on a university campus, I say thankfully because it's pretty rare that these things even result in a conviction. She apparently was motivated to do this merely because she wanted to garner sympathy from a young man she was interested in dating. Now, was she a feminist? I'm not sure, but we'd all be naive to think otherwise, at least certainly not after this. She'll be living with this for the rest of her life, the fact that she essentially ruined 2 young men's lives. And nobody likes liars like her. Except feminists, of course, so she'll fit right in. You see, even good women have everything to gain short-term by embracing feminism. And though long-term, it does not make them happy, as more and more aging feminists are finding out, many otherwise rational women will make the coward's choice and embrace feminism. Just give them a good reason. That's all for this video.